Mike Rowe rode through traffic. The Reds was on a roll, but Marquis was giving them a run for the money at Riverside Park. And the drivers predict who will be the champion for Busch Grand National North.
This year.
Every race driver takes on a challenge, and for Ricky Craven, the challenge will be the high banks of Monadnock Motor Raceway, because that's what this edition of Race Week is all about. Hello, I'm Ben Dodge, and I welcome you to more great racing action right here in the heart of the Northeast. Well, Ricky Craven is about to strap into his automobile. He'll have to qualify this afternoon on one of the toughest short tracks of them all, Monadnock Motor Raceway. But besides the Busch Grand National event from the high banks of Monadnock, we'll also bring you great racing action for more competition from Saturday night at Riverside Park Speedway. In addition to that, we were scheduled to bring you the great racing action from the Stafford Motor Speedway, but Mother Nature zapped us with rain conditions once again. So we're going to be taking a look at the Busch Grand National Circuit right here as the cars get geared up for the competition from the high banks of Monadnock Motor Raceway. Qualifying action put Kenny Bouchard to the inside of the front row of Pete Daniels. Then it was car number 12 to the outside of Bobby Gaeta with car number 36. Dave Davis, of course, driving the number 12. The 09 was Dale Shaw and Mike Stefanik with car number 20. As the field went to green, Kenny Bouchard looked very strong. Bobby Gaeta would run in second, and then it was Pete Daniels to challenge. Mike Stefanik was getting dialed in when Mike Rowe would go to the outside and really put some pressure on with car number 15. They were battling for 7 qualifying positions in this event. The battle was on with 1 lap to go for the number 2 spot. Kenny Bouchard had things well under control as Dale Shaw would dive to the inside. But Bob Gaeta was desperately trying to hold on for second. But when the checkered flag came out, it was Kenny Bouchard to take down the impressive victory. Bobby Gaeta would finish in the runner-up spot over Pete Daniels, and Dale Shaw would have to settle for position number 4. In the second Busch Grand National qualifier, the distance was once again 10 laps. Kelly Moore and Rick Miller would duke it out right from the start as Stub Fadden had to settle in for the number 3 spot. But not far behind, Mike Olson was putting on a challenge. In the back of the pack, Jamie Aubie, the champ, was coming to the front of the field, down beneath Jeff Spraker. Spraker was trying to move into one of those final qualifying spots with car number 69. Closing laps of the competition, Miller was trying to hold them off, but it was Kelly Moore who'd take down the victory. Miller would settle for second. Stub Fadden would take down the 3rd spot over Mike Olson to round out the top 4. Consolation event saw the defending champion, Jamie Aubie, to the outside of Roger Raymond. Second on the inside, Babe Branscombe with car number 31 as the field was set and ready to go to green. It was Raymond who put the Thunderbird to the front of the class. Aubie was still trying to hold on in second. And not far behind, it was Ron Lamell with car number 5. Lamell was trying to hold on impressively. Further back in the pack, Tony Sylvester was trying to qualify. Spraker was on the outside of Babe Branscombe. When Sylvester would get out of shape with car number 37, he'd gather it back. Ron Lamell would get way up into the loose stuff and lose a lot of valuable ground with car number 5. But at the front of the field, it was still Roger Raymond with car number 62, the Ford, that was able to get the job done. Jamie Aubie would finish in second. Spraker would be 3rd, and the final qualifying spot to Babe Branscombe. The top 6 cars made the transition through time trials, then redrew for their starting spots. The man that sat on the pole was Ricky Craven.
Well, that's important here. I mean, the chances are that if you go backwards here after starting first, then it's going to be darn hard to win the race. The problem with starting first, no excuses. So we're going to go out and there's no secrets here. I'm going to try and run like a rabbit.
Well, starting where I'm starting, I haven't got much choice but to go for it, because those guys back there aren't going to let me back in line. Very easy. So we're just going to go see if we can beat Ricky on the get-go and take it from there.
30 cars came out, and only 26 of the very best was assembled in the main event. At the fastest and toughest quarter mile of them all, the high banks of Monadnock Motor Raceway. Front row was Ricky Craven and Dick McCabe, Joe Bessie, and outside of him, Tony Hirschman, as the field was set to go to green. It was Craven who looked good for a while when suddenly Billy Clark got out of shape, initially right on the start of the competition. Kelly Moore and Kenny Bouchard just patiently waited in the wings with Bobby Gaeta not far behind in the hunt here. But out at the front of the field, Craven would look like the star of the show, when suddenly it was Bessie who moved the number 9 to the bottom to take over second. Kenny Bouchard was working over Tony Hirschman. They'd swap a little bit of paint for position number 5. Not far behind was Kelly Moore, who was threading the needle to get to the front of the field, when Hirschman would string it out a bit and pick up a spot. Then the strangest thing occurred. There was something dangling on a string from the back end of Jamie Aubie's car. Almost like a kite, this tail would fly. The caution would come out and change all of that. But back at the front of the field, there was no caution here. Just great racing. Kelly Moore and Hirschman were duking it out for position number 6. Billy Clark was sitting in the 5th spot. Meanwhile, Bobby Gaeta was bouncing around a bit with Stubb Fadden. Ricky Miller would take the low road, then come back out on the high road. That was almost a costly move by him. Jeff Spraker would make it by. Dragon would be okay with car number 71. And Ron Lamell was stuck right there in the middle of things. As Dion would spin to the inside, Miller would spin on the outside of the racing surface. That would tighten things back up once again. And Joey Carafas looked good in the start as Ricky Craven would try to fight back. Bessie got bounced around a bit. McCabe and Moore were also considered main factors here. But the speedy number 25 for Craven was the leader once again. And the battle was still on for position number 2. Carafas on the high side. Further back, Kenny Bouchard was running exceptionally strong with the ADAP number 72. Moore was down underneath Bessie to challenge for the number 3 spot, when suddenly it was Moore who picked up the position, dropping Bessie back to 4. Bobby Gaeta would have a tough day, and he would spin with car number 36, and that would tighten things back up. Then suddenly smoke would develop from beneath the number 9. The Bessie automobile had some type of mechanical problem. He'd have to go to the pits, then have to work his way back to the thick of things. On the restart, Kelly Moore, one of the toughest, with Ricky Craven, would duke it out for position number 1. Joey Carafas was watching all of this happen directly in front of him. As these two would swap paint, bounce around a bit, Carafas now had position number 2. Meanwhile, Kelly Moore, Dick McCabe, and Kenny Bouchard are really putting on a show, dicing it up for position here. Kenny Bouchard then would make a bold, aggressive move to the outside of Moore. Suddenly, Joey Carafas, with some help, would go spinning with car number 01. Carafas was a strong contender for the victory. Then Mike Rowe would tuck it down low beneath Craven. He put the pressure on. Time was starting to run out. Craven was still the man in command up front, but Rowe was really starting to work him over. Lap traffic would tell the story. Mike Rowe would go in deeper than most, and the Fisher Plows, number 15, had now taken over position number 1. It was Mike Rowe who was the star of this show. Craven had to settle for second for a while, and Kelly Moore was in the 3rd spot. Dick McCabe and Billy Clark were not far behind. 3 wide this story. Dion, the lapped automobile. McCabe wouldn't give up any extra room on the racetrack. But still, the battle was on, with the white flag out, less than 1 circuit to go for position number 1. It was Craven who wanted the lead back desperately, but there was no doubt about it that it was Mike Rowe who earned the number 1 spot and wasn't going to give it up with ease. Checkered flag was out. It was Mike Rowe to take down the victory. Ricky Craven in for 2nd, Kelly Moore was 3rd, Dick McCabe for 4th, and Billy Clark to round out the top 5. 6th through 10th was Tony Hirschman over Donnie Ling, Ron Lamell, Pete Daniels, and Joey Carafas.
Ricky was running real strong, and I got underneath him once there and got a little loose coming off 1 and 2 there. But, you know, we did catch up into the traffic, and he took the low line, I took the outside, and that was the turning point right there. So,
You a little surprised to be here right now?
yeah, I sure am. But like I say, I owe it all to my pit crew. I mean, Butch Craig, Dave McMaster's done a super job with the motor, and Danny and Tommy and Scott and the whole crew. I tell you, it takes more than a race driver to win races, and today they won it for me because they got me out on the track before I went down the lap.
You really got to give the credit to Mike Rowe. He came in and pitted lap 30, lap 40, and he came from the rear, dead last to first, and it was obvious at that point that he had the car to beat. We chased him down at the end there in the last 5 or 6 laps and made a race of it, but the truth of the matter is his car was really strong, and you know, it's really amazing when the guy comes that far back and shows that much strength. You know, you kind of got to wonder, you know, boy, maybe those 25, 30 years experience have helped out.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Race Week in just a moment.
To Race Week. Well, now it's time to take a look at the other divisions that were at the Busch Grand National Special Event at Monadnock Motor Raceway. The modifieds were here, and so were the Pro Stocks and the late models. So it's time to go back and take a look at more great racing from the high banks of Monadnock Motor Raceway. The NASCAR modifieds were ready for their feature event. Dunk Rudolph and Ted Brown would be making up the front row in the competition here. Dave Pinkham in row number 2 and Wade Cole with car number 33 to the outside of Pinkham's number 16. Then it was Brian Schofield and Rusty Ball as the stage was set. Initially, when the field went to green, Dunk Rudolph backed out of it a bit, giving Ted Brown the advantage. But once they got underway, it was Brown who took over the number 1 spot. Rusty Ball wasted no time at all, and he quickly moved to the outside, and Jerry Marquis was in far behind with car number 2X. As Ball was getting hitched up on the outside, Schofield and Ed Kennedy were trying to get dialed in as they were running strong, and Kirby Monteith, like a rocket, was coming from the back of the pack with car number 85. Then Brian Schofield would spin. Dave Pinkham would narrowly miss a spinning Schofield, and that would change and dice things up once again. But when the field was ready to go back to green, Ted Brown still looked like the star of the show. Jerry Marquis moved Dunk Rudolph up a bit, and he took over second. Rusty Ball was a factor. He's run with Dunk on several occasions. Contact was almost made when Rusty Ball would spin to the bottom with car number 20. Back to the front of the class, Jerry Marquis was looking to take over the number 1 spot, and he would do it with a bold, aggressive move to the outside. Once Marquis was in command, further back, once again, it was Kirby Monteith who was coming to the front of the field with ease with car number 85. The challenge was on, and right behind him, bidding for the number 1 spot, was Mikey Winitsko. 3 cars contending for position number 1. As Kirby Monteith would go to the outside, stand on the throttle, and literally pull away. Jerry Marquis would have to settle for second. Winitsko was still hunting him down. Then Dwight Jarvis became a surprise contender with car number 28. Jarvis was running very strong in the outside lane. He would take over position number 2. Time was running out, and Kirby Monteith would look like an easy contender for the win. Dwight Jarvis would finish in second. Third spot would be Jerry Marquis over Mikey Winitsko and Dunk Rudolph. In the 35-lap Pro Stock main event, Lenny Reynolds would be the man that ran up front in the competition, with Mike Gramellini also putting the pressure on. Gramellini would get a little bit out of shape. Jeff Zeidema would squeak down low as Zeidema would take over the number 1 spot. Gigi Gravel was not far behind, as car number 3 was also a factor for Brian Kenyon. Kenyon would go to the outside. Good Enough was stuck in the middle, and Brett Rollins was right there with car number 12. Jim Boniface was picking them off one at a time. Heavy lap traffic. Gigi Gravel to the outside of the leader. They come off the turn. Jeff Zeidema makes it 3 wide to maintain the lead. Jerry Marquis squeaks down low. Gigi Gravel is stuck in the outside lane. Marquis got position number 2. It is still Zeidema in command. Gigi Gravel now in the 3rd spot. Here comes Boniface and Kenyon working their way to contend among the top 5 cars. Good battle shaping up. Nose to tail at the checker. It is Zeidema to take down the win. Jerry Marquis in for second over Gigi Gravel, Rob Goodenough, and Jim Boniface. Late model feature event was 20 laps in distance, and Wayne Chapin would be starting right up front, and Jay Ferrillo would be making up the outside row. Right from the start, things looked pretty shaky. Ferrillo would get loose on the outside, and Rob Cross would sneak in. Then Robbie Bouchard would do a bold move right across and down through the infield. Involved in the mix-up was Roger Shepard, too, with car number 34. Back to green, he'd get a second shot at it, but he would have his problems once again, as Ferrillo would be all crossed up and bounce around. Rob Cross on the outside of the racetrack, almost making it 4 wide. Then off the turn, it was Brio who got bounced around with some help from the 24 of Scott Padno. Brio's right front wheel was kind of waving in the wings. But that wouldn't matter at all for the front pack of cars, because they were still dicing it out when a wheel would come off. The 442 of Joe Sumner bounced off the pin wall. No real damage done there. But the 442 was out for the day. Back to the front of the field, it was Chapin and now Teddy Chalmers on the outside when they went back to green. Chalmers was in command, and once the early leader had to do it now from the back of the pack. Then Barry Gray managed to break through with car number 29 and take over the number 1 position. Chalmers had to settle for second. Further back, there was another challenge with Bob Newcomb going on as he would try to hold off the pressures of car number 11 for Ed Stone. But to the line, the battle was no longer existing. It was Barry Gray into the winner's circle. Ed Stone for second, Bob Newcomb for third, Tom Stone, and Pete Jarvis. Well, now we've witnessed the competition from the fastest quarter mile, and now it's time to move on to the most successful quarter mile. The Riverside Park Speedway also ran on this past weekend with more Saturday night racing excitement. There were twin 60-lap events, 60 laps for the modified tour cars and 60 laps for the late model division. Besides that, the Pro Stocks would run 30 laps of competition too. So let's take a look at Saturday night racing action from Riverside Park Speedway. This was event number 1 in the Snap-on Tools Championship Series. Twin 60, 60 for the modifieds and 60s for the late models. Jeff Johnson put the only Ford in Riverside's modified field to the front of the class, and he would literally start to pull away. It was Rudinas who was challenging for second. Then he would make the move to the inside to take over the number 1 spot. John Zavisa wasn't too far behind, nor was Stan Greger or Chris Kopech with car number M6. Once Rudinas got into the lead, he was pressured heavily by John Zavisa with car number 01. Stan Greger was looking for a top finish, and Brad Hightower was equally as impressive. While all this was happening, Reggie Ruggiero was threading the needle and coming to the front of the field. Then suddenly there'd be a problem with the Ford. Liquid would come out of the bottom of the car. Bruce D'Alessandro, Ricky Fuller, and Dan Avery would literally spin and slide in the debris on the racetrack. Those cars would be damaged. Rick Fuller would not be able to return, but Bruce D'Alessandro would. Back to green, it was John Zavisa who was challenging on the inside when Reggie Ruggiero took the lead in the outside lane. Ruggiero had winded up looking for victory number 3. And Ed Kennedy, he wasn't far behind, doing a great job with car number 0. George Rudinas was setting in the 4th spot, and Kirby Monteith was very strong. Mike Iwanitsko was setting in position number 6 and trying to close up the gap with the Hoosier tire machine. But it was car number 2X for Jerry Marquis who had now moved into second. Once Marquis got into second, he was closing up the gap on the reg. But time was starting to run out. There wasn't many circuits remaining in this one. The checkered flag came out, and the reg would take down the victory. Jerry Marquis in for second, Kirby Monteith, Ed Kennedy, and John Zavisa. Pro Stock main event, 30 laps of distance, Scott Booley and Ed Carroll making up the front row. Wayne Carroll and Dave Barabee making up row number 2. As the field went to green, Barabee would have a little bit of a problem in the outside lane. Then he'd be able to gather it back nicely. Off the turn, Wayne Carroll was looking good, trying to hold them off for a while, but the man in front, at the front of this field, was Ed Carroll. But suddenly Wayne Carroll would go spinning with car number 1. Dave Barabee had a blocked racetrack in front of him, and that would bring out yet another caution. When the field regrouped and went back to green, Scott Booley and Ed Carroll were still duking it out for the number 1 spot. Contact was made, and Eddie Carroll would spin to the bottom side of the racetrack, and the officials would put Booley to the rear. It was then Rick Turcotte who looked very, very strong until Chris Kopech would muscle up some steam on the inside. Dave Caruso and Jerry Marquis were also duking it out, and Tony Papelli wasn't far behind with Tom Carey Jr. Jerry Marquis had now taken over position number 1. He was setting the pace at the front of the field. Dave Caruso was battling with Turcotte for the runner-up spot. And Mike Duquette with the Chrysler was threading the needle to get among the top 4 cars. Good racing action as Tom Fern was now working his way into the top 5 when Turcotte would spin all by himself. Chris Kopech became a victim of circumstances as Blaine Bell slid in with no place to go. And Dave Barabee would spin to avoid all of that. Then the last lap battle was for position number 2. Jerry Marquis would have an easy victory, but for Tony Papelli, it was a close one for second, as Dave Caruso would finish in third over Mike Duquette and Tommy Fern. In the 60-lap main event for the late model division, it was Fred LaForge who jumped into an early lead. Running for second, it was Barry Gray with Gary Pelletier challenging on the outside. Gray saw the door open, LaForge left it open, and Gray would move to the inside lane. 2 good contenders contending for the number 1 spot when Barry Gray would inch his way into the lead. Gary Pelletier would try to keep it nice and low to maintain his quest for position number 2. But it was Fred LaForge who was real tough to beat on the outside. But Barry Gray was the star of this show as he was dominant in the racing action at the front of the field. He would take down the impressive victory. Mike Quintiliano would finish in second over Teddy Chalmers, Fred LaForge, and Darren Parento. Well, Barry Gray has done it once again. 3 feature event victories already in the early season at Riverside Park Speedway. Well, next we're going to be taking a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be talking with the drivers of the Busch Grand National North Circuit and ask them who they think will be the champion for 1991. But before we do that, let's take a look at the results from some of your favorite area race facilities that competed this past weekend. During race week, we took a look at the Busch Grand Nationals in actual competition here at Monadnock Motor Raceway. Well, we thought it would be kind of interesting to talk with them in the pit area and ask them who they thought would be the champion for 1991. Now, remember, here on Race Week, at the end of the 1991 season, we'll play it all back and we'll see who was the smartest and who made the right call, as 1991 and the point battle is just getting heated up to determine the champion.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a tight battle all the way down between Jamie and Mike Rowe and a few of the others, but I think we got what it takes to beat them this year. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, I think it's going to be me.
And why is that?
Because I think we're getting our stuff together, and if we hadn't had an unfortunate situation in the first race there, we'd be in as good a situation as anybody is right now, and I think this is, we've got the equipment we need this year, so I really feel we have as good a chance as anybody.
Well, it's kind of hard to say right now. I'd like to think I was going to be, but, we've been here before, and we don't like to predict ahead, but, we're running real good, and Jordan Lumber Chevrolet is really looking strong right now, and we've had a couple of strong runs here at the beginning of the season. Hopefully today, we'll have another good run.
It's going to be a good battle, but hopefully at the end we'll have the ADAP number 72 on top.
That's a good question. Well, Craven, he's a darn good racer. There's no getting around it, but he's going to have some competition. I think Joey Kraftels will be close come the end. Kelly Moore might be close. There's about 7 or 8 cars that could win it pretty easy. We're going to try to see if we can't get our nose stuck in there somewhere.
It's hard to say right now with only 2 races complete, but everybody's still in the running at this point. Nobody's knocked out of it. Even people that haven't finished the first 2 races, they still have a chance. So it's really too early to tell.
I don't know. I think it's going to be one of the better chases for the championship this year than we've seen before. I think Jamie, with the loss of his major backing, is going to be back down on our level. And I think Ricky Craven, myself, never can count out Kelly Moore, Jamie. I think there's at least 6 teams this year that are going to be very capable of winning the championship.
Well, I think we've got as good a chance as anybody. There's a lot of guys that are running really good, Joe, and I think you'll see Dick McCabe make a real honest threat, Kelly and everybody, but the racetracks, we got some good equipment, and we've got a good experienced crew. We're counting heavily on it.
Now, you've already got quite a few under your belt already right now. Does it look like you're just going to be adding another one maybe at the end of the year?
Well, I'll tell you, anybody that wins this thing this year is really going to earn it. Guys are out for race this year, and I think the equipment's much better, and it's going to take a lot of luck, but we're confident. We've got a hell of a good crew and good equipment.
Well, as another great weekend in motorsports comes to a close, it's time to look ahead, and the next edition of Race Week is going to be another great edition. We'll be taking a look at the Friday night version of the greatest race in the history of spring, the Spring Sizzler from the Stafford Motor Speedway. We'll also be taking a look at great racing action open wheel style from the Oswego Speedway, more short track competition from Monadnock and Riverside Park, and more great racing action from the American Canadian Tour. All of that and more on the next edition of Race Week. Take care. Bye-bye now.